What if greatness doesn't look the way we expect? What if a man could rewrite the story of basketball not by scoring, but by standing tall, silent, and impossibly thin? This isn't the story of a high-flying dunker or a bruising center. This is the legend of Manute Bol, an enigma, a guardian at the rim, a man whose body looked like it might shatter at any moment. He broke the NBA, not with thunder, but with quiet defiance. Why did the skinniest player ever make the league tremble? Let's step inside his long, unlikely shadow. If you want to understand Manute Bol, you have to let go of everything you think you know about basketball. Because Manute wasn't just a player, he was a phenomenon, a paradox, a legend forged not through dominance, but through disruption. He didn't control the game with gravity like Shaq or glide through it like Jordan. Number Manute floated outside the rhythm of the game, like a shadow the light could never quite reach. He was the NBA's tallest player, but height alone doesn't explain him. He was different. Where other big men rumbled, Manute whispered. Where they crushed, he deflected. His wingspan was like a spider's web, invisible. He waited for them, lured you into the air, and then erased you from it. No celebration, no roar, just silence. And that silence hurt. Imagine being a 6'20" forward, grinding your way into the paint, finally elevating for the shot you've practiced 1,000 times only to have it vanish mid-air, touched by something impossibly long, impossibly calm. That was Manute Bol's true power. He made scorers doubt. You can't chart that in a box score, you can't capture it in a highlight, but every NBA player who faced him remembered it. The fear of release, the glance upward before the jump, the slow realization that your best move meant nothing if ball was in the area. And this is where the mythology begins. Because Manute wasn't supposed to be here. He was born in Turalei, Sudan, a Dinka tribesman, a cattle herder, a spear thrower. He didn't grow up dreaming of hardwood or sneakers, he grew up dodging civil war, famine, and death. His childhood was marked not by basketball drills, but by survival. And yet, he was chosen. A coach named Don Feely saw a photograph, saw the limbs, the height, the mystery, and took a chance. Manute, who hadn't played organized basketball until he was nearly 20, was thrust into a world he didn't recognize. America, language barriers, fast food, bright lights, and eventually, the NBA. Most players arrive through years of structured grooming, AAU, high school, college. Manute arrived like folklore, raw, unknown, and misunderstood. They laughed at his build, they questioned his skills, but they underestimated his spirit. Because Manute didn't come to fit in, he came to haunt. He played for the Washington Bullets, then the Warriors, Sixers, and Heat. But wherever he went, he carried that same terrifying gift. The ability to take away the one thing every player lived for: points. He once blocked 4 shots in a single possession. He blocked 6 3-pointers in a game. He averaged 5 blocks per game as a rookie. These weren't just records, they were warnings.
Awesome playing with him. He was such a funny individual. He was warm-hearted. He had such a passion for the game. And, you know, the stories that he shared with me, you know, coming from Sudan, and the opportunities that he had growing up, and being able to now to see his full circle come to fruition, it was just unbelievable. And I mean, he was a 7'7", but he thought that he was 5'10". He thought that he was a god. He always wanted to handle the basketball. He always wanted to shoot threes. He always wanted to play me one-on-one in practice.
And even though he scored less than 2.6 points per game across his career, he was never invisible. Quite the opposite. Fans came to see him for the strangeness, the angles, the limbs, but also for the joy. Because here's the twist in Manute Bol's story. He was funny, wildly so. He had the driest wit, the deepest heart, and the clearest sense of perspective. He once made 7 3-pointers in a single half just to prove a point. A man known for blocking raining threes like a shooting guard. And when asked why, he grinned, "If I can't dunk on them, I'll shoot over them." He once got into a scuffle and famously shouted, "You call that a punch? In my country, that's a handshake." He sent nearly all of his NBA earnings back to Sudan to support his people, to fund education, to save lives. He was a player, yes, but more than that. He was a symbol, a bridge between two worlds, between America's spectacle and Africa's survival. No one carried more contradictions. He was impossibly tall, impossibly light, impossibly kind, impossibly brave. Even his retirement felt like an epilogue no one could write. Because how do you explain a man who once said, "I didn't play for money, I played to make my people proud"? And he did. Long after he left the NBA, long after his knees gave out and the lights dimmed, Manute Bol's shadow remained. Every shot blocker that followed Mutombo, Eaton, Gobert carried some of his echo. But none had his spirit. None had his story. And none, absolutely none, will ever block more shots than they score. That's the riddle. That's the legend. That's Manute Bol, basketball's quietest revolutionary. The man who proved that in a world obsessed with more, less can be everything. But before the cheers, before the spotlights, Manute Bol was just a boy in Turalei, Sudan, a place almost forgotten by the world. The land was harsh and the odds were long, but the people were proud, and the Dinka tribe was legendary for its height and resilience. Manute's childhood was a poem of endurance. He grew up tall, awkward, and gentle, the son of a tribal elder. At 12, he was already a local myth, able to look over mud walls and palm trees, a gentle giant in bare feet. His father believed height was a blessing, but in Sudan, it was also a burden. Every day was survival. Herding cattle, fetching water, dodging the violence of civil war. There were no courts, no sneaker deals, no scouts, but there was always a dream, whispered in the wind, a hope that somewhere beyond the horizon, a different life was possible.
You'd be a farmer?
Yeah. If I don't play basketball, yeah.
Where would you be farming?
And home. And I will not see in United States too, so I will not be taught.
Basketball came to Manute Bol not through training camps or television broadcasts, but like a rumor, a myth whispered between boys in the dust. There was no arena, no polished hardwood, just a hoop twisted out of wire, nailed to a leaning tree, swaying in the breeze like a challenge from the gods. The backboard? A piece of metal scrap. The ball? Scarred and stitched, more patchwork than leather. But none of that mattered, because under that African sun, Manute learned something that no coach could teach: instinct. He played barefoot, his feet brushing against thorns and cracked earth, but his eyes already scanning the angles. He studied not with notebooks, but with silence. Watching, waiting, timing his jumps like a hunter times the spring of a trap. Every game wasn't a display. It was a lesson in geometry, patience, and anticipation. And even then, before the lights, before the fame, he already knew something most players never learn. The art of defense isn't about domination. It's about denial. It's about the quiet power of saying no. But here's the impossible question. Could a boy from the Dinka tribe, a boy who didn't even know his real birthday, who had never seen a regulation basketball court, somehow walk the path to NBA immortality? The distance from Turalei to the NBA wasn't just about geography. It was a leap between worlds. A boy from the cattle fields, thrust toward a game invented half a world away. And yet, somehow, a bridge appeared fragile, improvised, miraculous. It began with an American coach named Don Feely. He came to Sudan to scout for talent and heard whispers, rumors of a giant. A young man with arms like tree branches and a presence that defied description. Manute didn't volunteer. He was chosen. But first, he had to prove he existed. A long walk across the savannah followed. Days under the sun, through thorny brush, to find a photographer, to take a picture, to send to America so that someone could believe. That photo would become a passport. That leap of faith would change not just a life, but the arc of basketball itself. And when Manute finally arrived in the United States, it was like a dream speaking another language. Everything was foreign. The food, the shoes, the rules. He was 19, maybe 20. No one knew for sure. He was too thin, too raw, too different. But that didn't matter, because something else had followed him across the ocean, something no coach could measure and no scout could quantify. A presence. Manute Bol didn't play basketball the way others did. He floated through it, like an ancient tale come to life, like the game had been waiting for him all along. And now, it was America's turn to learn what dust courts and wire hoops had already taught. That greatness can rise from anywhere, even the silence between swishes. And sometimes, the game doesn't need another scorer. It needs a guardian, a phantom, a force that makes every shot uncertain. That was the boy from Sudan. That was Manute Bol. And his journey was just beginning. Opportunity, as fragile as it was rare, arrived in the form of an American coach, Don Feely. Word spread through the streets of Khartoum like smoke on the wind. A man from the other side of the world was teaching basketball in Sudan's capital. For most, it was just another rumor, another story told over tea and dust. But for Manute, it was a signal flare in the darkness, a whisper of destiny. He didn't wait. He walked. 6 days. Across plains cracked by sun, through brush and silence. Hungry, hopeful, unafraid. When he arrived, he didn't knock. He stood, towering, silent. Feely opened the door, and the first thing he saw was height. But the second was something even rarer in tension. Manute's eyes held something that didn't belong to the world of excuses. They burned with belief. Still, Feely was blunt. The dream wasn't ready for him. Manute spoke no English, had never taken a standardized test. His frame, though long and haunting, looked more spectral than strong. "He'll never survive in America," Feely said. Not cruelly, just honestly. And for a moment the dream trembled. A flicker in the wind. But fate does not bow to doubt. It waits. And sometimes, it intervenes. When Feely lost his own coaching job, most would have turned inward. But not him. Instead, he carried Manute's story like a torch. Calling schools, writing letters, begging for a chance. "Just give him one try," he said. "You'll never see anything like him again." Most laughed. A 7-foot-plus Dinka tribesman who barely knew the rules of the game? Who would stake a scholarship or worse, a draft pick on that? "He's not ready," they said. "He's not American enough," they muttered. "He's not marketable," they whispered behind closed doors. And maybe they were right by their standards. But Manute Bol had never belonged to anyone's standards. He was a player forged in a land where survival was the first sport. Where defense wasn't a tactic, it was a way of life. Where the measure of a man wasn't in points scored, but in burdens carried. Feely saw that, even if others didn't. And somewhere between those rejection letters and late-night phone calls, between the confusion of cultures and the stubborn hope of one man, the impossible began to take root. Because hope, in Manute Bol's story, was never an answer. It was a question. Could greatness be found in a player no one understood? Could the NBA, a league built on flash and scoring, make room for a quiet giant whose gift was taking things away? Could subtraction, at last, be seen as power? Was the NBA ready for a revolution? Or was it simply too busy looking up to see who was waiting below? One thing was certain. Manute wasn't going to stop. He had already walked farther than most would ever dream. Now, he was just waiting for the door to open. The odds lengthened again when the gatekeepers of bureaucracy tightened their grip. Manute Bol, fresh off a miracle journey from Sudan to America, found himself tangled in the invisible net of paperwork, North Carolina AA eligibility rules, and immigration technicalities. The big schools, the Division I powerhouses shut their doors. Not because he wasn't good enough, but because the system wasn't built for someone like him. A man with no birth certificate, no SAT score, no basketball resume that fit neatly into a box. But the dream did not die. It only changed shape. Because dreams, like Manute, don't always follow the expected path. Instead of Madison Square Garden, he landed in Bridgeport, Connecticut. A forgotten town with a Division II school that had no business being a launchpad for one of basketball's strangest and most beautiful legends. The University of Bridgeport wasn't supposed to be part of NBA history. But when Manute walked into that cold, dimly lit gym, it became sacred. There were no television crews, no sneaker deals, just wooden bleachers, metal rims, and a giant with arms that stretched like shadows. And then he played. Not just tall dominant. He averaged 22.5 points, 13.5 rebounds, and 7 blocks per game. But even those numbers felt small compared to the aura he brought. Every shot near the basket became a prayer. Every possession, an audition for belief. Words spread quickly. Scouts drove hours through snowstorms and back roads to catch a glimpse, not just to see if the stats were real, but to see if he was, because Manute didn't move like any player they'd ever seen. He didn't jump high. He didn't dunk with anger. He hovered. He redirected. He played basketball like a mirage. Plays with the eyes. Just when you thought you had him figured out, he disappeared and reappeared somewhere else. He was learning, too. He picked up English awkwardly at first, then with humor and clarity. He learned American customs, laughed at jokes he didn't fully understand, and asked questions that revealed a mind just as sharp as his timing on the court. But no matter how many blocks he tallied, no matter how many games he changed, the same whispers followed him. Too skinny. Too rough. Too weird. No high school career. No AAU credentials. No father who had played in the league. No familiar story. He was, to many, a risk. But what they couldn't see, what they refused to understand, was that Manute Bol was the story. He had walked across continents, outlasted war, transcended borders. He wasn't just a basketball player, he was a living challenge to everything the NBA thought it knew about scouting, success, and stardom. And with every game in that tiny gym in Bridgeport, the myth grew taller. The scouts came to measure his wingspan, but they left wondering how to measure his will. Still, hope blossomed in the unlikeliest places. In the 1985 NBA Draft, the Washington Bullets took a chance, picking Manute in the second round. The moment was seismic, the first true African giant in the NBA. But what happened next was something nobody could have scripted. Manute Bol's first NBA season wasn't just impressive, it was myth-making. It began with a whisper and erupted into a roar. In his debut as a starter, he stunned everyone. 18 points, 12 blocks, and a presence that seemed to tilt the very rules of the game. The hardwood suddenly looked smaller with Manute out there. Passing lanes vanished. Floaters hung in the air like bait. Guards second-guessed their cuts. Centers hesitated at the rim. But that was just the opening act. Barely a month later, he did what no one thought possible: 15 block shots in a single game. A record that still stands like a monument, untouched by time. Even in an era of athletic freaks and modern verticals, no one has come close to it. Not Mutombo, not Olajuwon, not even the analytics era's prized defenders. Because Manute wasn't just playing basketball, he was rewriting its grammar. Where others chased highlights, he erased them. Where others built legacies on points, he built his on denial. Opponents didn't know what to do. Jump shooters faltered, unsure if their release would reach daylight. Big men, used to bullying their way into the paint, suddenly found themselves swatting at ghosts. He didn't block shots with power, he did it with presence. He didn't chase. He waited. And then, like a spider springing its trap, the arms came down. By season's end, he had done something unthinkable. He averaged more blocks per game than points. Think about that. In a league that worships scoring, he turned defense into devotion. His stat line became poetry. A player who took away more than he gave. A living paradox. A giant who didn't dominate with muscle, but with mystery. Every shot he blocked wasn't just a stat, it was a question. Are you sure you want to come in here? Are you sure you want to challenge this strange, elegant defender with the limbs of a myth and the face of a monk? Because Manute Bol made defense not just a tactic, but a spectacle. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the strongest. He certainly wasn't the flashiest. But in a game built on noise, he made his name in silence. He turned the court into a chessboard. He made scorers hesitate. He made coaches adjust. He made fans believe. And in that first season, he didn't just block shots, he blocked expectations. Manute Bol showed the world that sometimes the skinniest man on the floor could become the game's greatest gatekeeper. Not by overpowering you, but by reminding you that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't offense. It's the art of saying no. If basketball is a game of contrasts, then no pairing in history captured its paradoxes, poetry, and power quite like Manute Bol and Muggsy Bogues. Together, they were a living contradiction. The tallest and shortest players the NBA had ever seen, both wearing the same jersey, standing side by side during warm-ups, during timeouts, and at center court for every jump ball. Manute, a towering 7'7", moved like a haunted tree, his arms swaying in slow, deliberate arcs. Muggsy, at 5'3", zipped between defenders like a breeze that couldn't be caught. Together, they defied logic and made magic. To the casual eye, they looked like a joke, a meme before memes existed. But on the court, they played like poets. Where Manute erased shots, Muggsy disrupted rhythms. Where Manute stood still and absorbed, Muggsy darted and provoked. They were yin and yang, stillness and speed, reach and reflex, serenity and spark. Opponents didn't know where the threat would come from. Try to back down the little guy? He'd pick your pocket before your first dribble. Try to go over him? Manute would swat your ambition into the third row. They didn't just defend the court, they haunted it. But what made their story unforgettable wasn't just how they played, it was who they were. Two men who weren't supposed to be there. Manute from the cattle villages of Sudan, speaking broken English, barely weighing more than a shooting guard. Muggsy from the rough courts of Baltimore, told all his life he'd never make it. Never last. Never matter. They were both misfits by NBA standards. Too tall, too short, too strange, but in each other, they found something rare in professional sports. Recognition. The kind that runs deeper than strategy or statistics. The kind that sees past surface and into struggle. On the floor, they carved out a silent language. Muggsy would flash a look. Manute would tilt a shoulder. No need for words, just trust. Because when you've spent your life proving people wrong, there's a quiet understanding that lives inside your bones. They laughed together. They practiced together. They supported each other when the world didn't know what to make of them. And in doing so, they redefined what basketball could look like. They didn't bend to the mold, they shattered it. And in their wake, they left a new kind of hope. Hope for the undersized kid with quick hands. Hope for the awkward giant with soft eyes. Hope that if you play with heart, with conviction, with joy, there is a place for you. They weren't just teammates. They were a metaphor for resilience, for contrast, for the beautiful weirdness of sports. Because sometimes the greatest moments in basketball aren't about numbers or rings or records. Sometimes they're about the image of two impossible men walking out of the tunnel together, one casting a shadow that stretched across the paint, the other moving fast enough to outrun it. Manute and Muggsy, a tower and a spark. Proof that in basketball, as in life, the best stories are the ones no one believes until they see it with their own eyes. And then they never forget it. As the years passed, the NBA tried to shrink Manute Bol into a box he could never possibly fit in. He was labeled, categorized, filed away in the minds of coaches and analysts as a one-dimensional asset. Just a shot blocker, just a novelty act, just a freakish piece of trivia wrapped in limbs. But then, every so often, a coach came along who dared to see something more. Enter Don Nelson, the mad scientist of basketball. A man who didn't just tolerate chaos, he invited it. While others saw Manute as a defensive statue planted in the paint, Nelson saw untapped potential in the absurd. So he made a decision no one else had ever considered. He told Manute Bol, the tallest man in the NBA, to shoot three-pointers. Not as a joke, not as a gimmick, as a weapon. If he can shoot, Nelson said, why not let him? And so it happened. One night in Oakland, the crowd watched, blinking in disbelief, as Manute Bol, a player whose arms looked longer than some players' careers, drifted beyond the arc, set his feet, and let one fly. The form was wild. Arms folded in like a crane unfolding its wings. A release so slow, it looked like a dare. And then swish, the arena gasped. Then it erupted. Opposing defenders didn't know what to do. They sagged off at first, waving him off like a windmill with a basketball. But when the second one fell, and then the third, the air in the building changed. Suddenly, the novelty became a threat. The play-by-play rang out with disbelief.
3 threes in the third quarter from Manute Bol. The Sixers have found an offensive weapon. Chambers was just leaning on him a little too much.
It was chaos. It was beautiful. Sure, his career three-point percentage hovered around 22%. But that wasn't the point. The point was that he was never supposed to shoot at all. And on one unforgettable night, Manute Bol didn't just shoot, he caught fire. 6 three-pointers in a single half. A record for a center. Untouched for decades. Still whispered about by fans who were lucky enough to witness it live. Opposing coaches threw their clipboards in surrender. Teammates lifted Manute off the floor like he just hit a game winner. Commentators didn't even know what to say, because there was no playbook for this. He wasn't just a gatekeeper anymore. He was the wild card, the glitch in the matrix, the tallest sniper the game had ever seen. And more than anything, he was a reminder you don't have to make sense to make an impact. That was Manute's real gift. Every time the world thought it had him figured out, he changed the rules. A set-foot set the perimeter shooter. A defender who preferred to wait, not chase. A humanitarian who sent most of his earnings to save his war-torn homeland. A giant with the soul of an artist, the wit of a philosopher, and the unpredictability of a storm. In a league where size usually means domination, Manute Bol gave us something rarer. The permission to be different, to surprise, to defy expectations not just once but over and over again. He wasn't trying to prove them wrong. He was simply proving that there was more. More to his game, more to his purpose, more to what a player could be. Because in the end, Manute Bol wasn't just a shot blocker or a three-point shooter. He was a storyteller, and every shot, every block, every moment of disbelief was part of a tale only he could write. The NBA didn't always know what to do with him. But for the fans, Manute Bol wasn't a sideshow. He was a revelation. And every time he pulled up from deep, every time that awkward, perfect shot fell through the net, he reminded the world, the game is bigger than rules. And so was he. For all his highlights, Manute Bol's journey through the NBA was never easy. His thin frame made him a target, sometimes literally. Opponents saw his spindly arms and narrow shoulders and mistook them for weakness. They tried to bully him, to knock him down with hard screens and cheap elbows, to make him feel like an outsider in a league built on bravado and muscle. But Manute was never rattled. He took every shove with an almost spiritual calm. He understood something most players never did. That power doesn't always come from size, and toughness isn't measured by how much you give, but how much you can take and still stand tall. There was a running bet in Boston whispered among the Celtics about who would finally dunk on the Sudanese giant. Larry Bird, a master of psychological warfare, stoked the flames, putting cash on the line and daring his teammates to go at Manute. Game after game, they tried and failed, arms flailing against his endless reach. Finally, Robert Parrish broke through, throwing down a dunk over Manute. The Celtics' locker room erupted in celebration, not because it counted for 2 points, but because, in that moment, they'd conquered a myth. And then there was Michael Jordan, never one to shrink from a challenge. He went right at Bol, attacking the rim, skying over defenders, determined to put the shot-blocking legend on a poster. Jordan soared, unleashed his signature power, and for a fleeting second,
Jordan is there. Fresh shot clock for the Bulls. Michael going to work. Oh, in your face, Manute. Reverse slam, Jordan.
But Manute just shrugged it off, jogging back on defense with a half smile, as if he knew there would always be another shot to block, another day to stand tall. He never talked trash, never tried to even the score with words. His response was always the same. Meet them at the rim, again and again, with patience, dignity, and the quiet certainty that he belonged. In a league obsessed with swagger and sound bites, Manute Bol let his game speak for his country, for his people, and for everyone who's ever felt underestimated. He didn't care about getting dunked on. He knew, sooner or later, he'd block the next one. Off the court, Manute became a fan favorite, a cult hero. He was the star of commercials, the life of the locker room, the teammate who sent most of his paychecks home to Sudan. Endorsement deals poured in from Nike to Church's Chicken, but most of the money disappeared into relief efforts and family support. Manute's NBA journey was never about stats. It was about resilience, the willingness to be laughed at, doubted, even ridiculed, and keep coming back. It was about changing the conversation. One block, one three-pointer, one improbable friendship at a time. He never won a championship, never made an all-star team, never cared about legacy. He cared about sending money home, making people laugh, and leaving the game just a little stranger and a lot more beautiful than he found it. When the stadium lights dimmed, Manute Bol's shadow only grew longer. He was no longer just a basketball player, he was a guardian, an advocate, a lifeline to a nation torn by conflict. While many athletes measured their worth by rings and contracts, Manute measured his by the hope he could send across an ocean. He used his NBA fortune to build schools, dig wells, and rescue family after family from violence. He funded refugee camps, bought food for entire villages, and brought global attention to Sudan's suffering. He did it quietly, sending home checks so large that teammates joked he was the only NBA star who finished his career with less than he started.
It's really dry back there, and a lot of people are dying right now because hungry and no water, no food. And so what I try to do, I've been doing, send some money to my people and help them out because I love my country and I want to help my people. I feel bad what's going on there, and sometimes I think about that. I say, if I didn't come to America right now, I might be one of these guys. Maybe I might be dead by this time.
But his compassion brought risk. Returning home, he was accused of espionage after a U.S. airstrike, trapped by his own government, denied the right to leave, his American dream replaced by exile. Yet he remained undeterred, working with humanitarian organizations, meeting U.S. officials, and raising funds any way he could, even fighting in a celebrity boxing match to support his people. What drives a man to give away nearly everything he earns? To risk his freedom? To endure suspicion and poverty? Just to save strangers and kin alike? Manute's answer was always simple. God made me tall so I could help my people. He became more than an athlete. He became a symbol of hope for a nation, an ambassador for the voiceless, and a lesson in what it truly means to use your gifts. Manute Bol died in 2010, just months before South Sudan gained its independence, a dream he spent his life pursuing. His passing was mourned in two worlds, the NBA and the dusty villages where his name had become legend. But the story did not end there. His son, Bol, stepped onto NBA hardwood. Years later, a new generation. The same impossible frame, the same gentle spirit. The world watched, holding its breath, waiting to see if Bol could honor the legacy of a father whose shadow touched not just the game, but the world. In South Sudan, thousands of kids play basketball on courts built with Manute's help. He paved the way for a flood of African talent, opened doors that had been bolted shut, and inspired a continent to believe you don't have to fit in to belong. You just have to stand tall. His real record isn't in the stat sheet. It's in the lives he touched, the dreams he gave wings, the legacy that still grows one impossibly tall, impossibly kind step at a time. So why did Manute Bol, perhaps the skinniest player ever, break the NBA without even trying? Because he never tried to be anyone else. He redefined greatness not by force, but by presence. He proved that sometimes subtraction is stronger than addition, blocking not just shots, but also doubt and despair. Manute stood out and never shrank back. He gave everything he had, then found a way to give even more. His story shows you don't need to score the most or fit anyone else's mold. You just need to show up as yourself and reach for the rim, for others, for hope. Remember Manute Bol not just for his records, but for how he used every inch of his reach to lift others higher, always standing tallest for the things that matter most. If you like this video, don't forget to press the subscribe button and ring the bell to receive notifications about the latest videos from our channel. Please leave your comments and suggestions below in the comments section, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. This action also contributes to motivating us to work even more diligently. Have a great day.